Sarah Harrison clutched the crumpled letter in her trembling hand, the Missouri wind whipping her chestnut hair across tear-stained cheeks as she stood before the weathered stagecoach depot. 3 years, she'd waited 3 long years since Thomas had gone west to stake their claim in Wyoming territory, promising to send for her once he'd established their homestead. Now, in the spring of 1878, the letter from a stranger had finally arrived, bearing the news that shattered her world. Her husband had taken another wife in Laramie and wanted no part of his Eastern bride. "Madam? You getting on or not?" The stagecoach driver's gruff voice pulled Sarah from her thoughts. "We're headed to Cheyenne in 5 minutes, with or without you." Sarah gazed at her single trunk and carpet bag. Everything she owned sat before her, the remnants of a life abandoned. At 24, she was neither wife nor widow, just a woman betrayed. She had sold what little remained of her parents' estate after their passing to purchase this ticket west, determined to confront Thomas and reclaim her dignity, if not her marriage. "I'm coming," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The journey west was punishing. 6 days of bone-jarring travel, cramped quarters, dust that found its way into every fold of clothing, and the constant anxiety of what awaited her in Wyoming territory. Sarah's only comfort came from a tattered copy of Wordsworth's poems and occasional conversation with Mrs. Abernathy, a missionary's widow traveling to live with her son. "Men out west sometimes forget themselves," Mrs. Abernathy had told her with a knowing look. "The territory changes them. Perhaps not all for the better." When the stagecoach finally rolled into Bright Creek, the last stop before Laramie, Sarah was too exhausted to continue. Her funds were dwindling, and the thought of immediately facing Thomas and his new bride made her stomach churn with dread. "Last stop before we continue to Laramie tomorrow morning," the driver announced. "Anyone getting off here, best do it quick." Sarah gathered her belongings and descended shakily onto the dusty main street. Bright Creek was little more than a collection of wooden buildings straddling a creek that glinted in the late afternoon sun. A general store, saloon, small church, and what appeared to be a modest hotel lined the single thoroughfare. "You need some help with that trunk, miss?" The voice came from behind her, deep and resonant. Sarah turned to find herself looking up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and sandy hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt rode comfortably on his hips, marking him as someone accustomed to the frontier's necessities. Yes, thank you," Sarah managed, suddenly conscious of her travel-stained appearance. He lifted her trunk effortlessly. "Name's Samuel Lawson. Most folks just call me Sam." "You look like you're a long way from home." "Sarah Harrison," she replied. "And yes, I've come from Missouri." "Missouri's a fair piece from here," Sam remarked, leading her toward the hotel. "You got family in Bright Creek?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "No, I'm traveling to Laramie to see my husband." Something flickered in Sam's expression. "Your husband in Laramie, but he didn't come to meet you?" "He doesn't exactly know I'm coming," Sarah said, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. Sam seemed to sense her discomfort and didn't press further. "Well, Mrs. Harrison, the Creekside Hotel isn't much to look at, but Mrs. Zimmerman keeps it clean. Best place to rest before heading to Laramie." At the hotel's front desk, Sarah counted out her remaining money with dismay. After paying for a night's lodging and a meal, she would barely have enough for the stage fare to Laramie. "Problem, madam?" Sam asked, still holding her trunk. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "Not at all. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Lawson." Sam tipped his hat. "If you need anything while you're in town, I've got a small ranch just outside. Anyone can point you in the right direction." After he left, Sarah secured a small room on the second floor and finally allowed herself the luxury of tears. What had she been thinking, traveling all this way to confront a man who had so easily discarded her? What would she do when she reached Laramie? And what would become of her afterward? Morning arrived with no answers but renewed determination. Sarah changed into her second-best dress, a practical blue cotton with minimal adornment, and pinned her hair up neatly. The stagecoach wasn't due until noon, giving her time to purchase a few necessities at the general store. The store was empty save for an elderly proprietor who nodded when she entered. Sarah had just selected a small packet of hairpins when the bell above the door jangled. Two rough-looking men entered, smelling strongly of whiskey despite the early hour. "Well, look what we got here," the taller one said, eyeing Sarah with unconcealed interest. "Ain't seen you before, pretty lady." Sarah clutched her purchase and moved toward the counter. "Excuse me, gentlemen." The second man blocked her path. "What's your hurry? We're just being neighborly." "The lady doesn't appear interested in your version of neighborliness, Davidson." Sam Lawson stood in the doorway, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. "Mind your business, Lawson," the taller man growled. "We're just having a friendly conversation." "Mrs. Harrison," Sam said, his gaze never leaving the two men. "You about finished with your shopping?" Sarah nodded, grateful for his intervention. "Yes, thank you. Then I'll escort you back to the hotel. These fellows were just leaving." The statement carried the weight of a command, and surprisingly, the men backed down, muttering obscenities as they exited. Outside, Sarah released a shaky breath. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "Sam," he corrected gently. "And it was nothing. Davidson and his friend get ornery when they're drinking, which is most days." He glanced at her curiously. "You're still set on heading to Laramie today?" Sarah nodded, though with less conviction than before. "Mind if I ask what's waiting for you there? Besides your husband, I mean." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him sharply. "What do you know about my husband?" Sam hesitated. "Laramie's not so big that news doesn't travel." "What's your husband's name?" "Thomas Harrison," Sarah replied, watching Sam's expression carefully. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Thomas Harrison, who came from Missouri about 3 years back, took up with Zoe Bellamy last year." Sarah's legs nearly gave way beneath her. "You know him?" Sam guided her to a bench outside the general store. "I drive cattle to Laramie twice a year. Last time I was there, Harrison was celebrating his marriage to the Bellamy woman. I didn't know he already had a wife." The confirmation of what she'd been told in the letter felt like a physical blow. "Neither did she, I imagine," Sarah said bitterly. Sam's expression softened. "Mrs. Harrison, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but what exactly are you planning to do in Laramie?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, the fight draining from her. "I sold everything to come west. I have nowhere else to go." Sam was quiet for a long moment. "The stage won't be through till noon. Let me buy you some breakfast, and we can talk about your options." At the small cafe adjacent to the hotel, Sam ordered coffee and breakfast for them both. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, brought steaming plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "You mentioned you have a ranch," Sarah said, desperate to think about anything other than her predicament. Sam nodded. "Nothing fancy. About 200 acres with a decent herd of cattle and a few horses. My father started it before the war, and I took over after he passed." "You run it alone?" "Got a couple of hands that help with the cattle. My sister Zoe keeps house, though she's visiting our aunt in Denver just now." He sipped his coffee. "It's peaceful. Far cry from where I was after the war." "You fought?" Sarah asked, noticing for the first time a certain guardedness in his demeanor. "Union cavalry. Spent 4 years seeing the worst of men." His eyes clouded briefly. Coming west was starting over. Sarah understood that sentiment all too well. "And now you've found peace?" A small smile played at his lips. "Most days. What about you, Mrs. Harrison? What did you leave behind in Missouri?" "Sarah," she corrected, surprising herself. "Just my parents' graves and a lifetime of memories. After they died of influenza 2 years ago, there wasn't much keeping me there except waiting for Thomas." She laughed humorlessly. "I was so certain he would send for me." Sam studied her across the table. "Can I speak plainly?" Sarah nodded. "Harrison isn't worth the dirt on your shoes. I only met him a couple of times, but I know the type. A man who'd abandon his wife back east and marry another out west isn't the kind who'll welcome you with open arms when you show up." "You think he'll turn me away?" Sarah said, the reality she'd been avoiding finally spoken aloud. "At best. At worst." Sam let the implication hang in the air. Laramie's rough country. Not a place for a woman alone, especially one without resources or protection. Sarah pushed her barely touched plate away. "So what would you have me do, Mr. Lawson? Return to Missouri with nothing? Beg on the streets of Bright Creek?" "I'd have you consider another option," Sam said carefully. "I need someone to keep house while my sister's away. It's honest work, with room and board included." It would give you time to decide your next steps without rushing into a confrontation with Harrison. Sarah stared at him. You'd offer employment to a complete stranger? I'm a fair judge of character, Sam replied. And I know what it's like to be at a crossroads with no good options. The job's yours if you want it, for as long as you need. The stagecoach rumbled into town precisely at noon. Sarah stood on the hotel porch, her trunk at her feet, watching as passengers disembarked and mail was unloaded. The driver called for new passengers. Her ticket to Laramie was in her reticule. One more day of travel would bring her face to face with the man who had abandoned her. And then what? Sam waited silently beside her, having offered to carry her trunk regardless of her decision. He hadn't pressed her after their breakfast conversation, simply stating that he'd return at noon to either help her board the stage or transport her to his ranch. Last call for Laramie, the driver shouted. Sarah took a deep breath and turned to Sam. Your offer of employment, does it still stand? Relief washed across his features. It does. Then I accept, Mr. Lawson. At least for now. Sam's ranch was a modest but well-maintained property nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. The main house was constructed of sturdy logs with a stone chimney, a covered porch wrapping around the front. A barn, corral, and bunkhouse for the ranch hands completed the central buildings, with grazing land stretching beyond. It's lovely, Sarah said as Sam's wagon approached. After the desolation she'd felt that morning, the peaceful beauty of the place stirred something within her. It's home, Sam replied simply, bringing the wagon to a halt. He jumped down and extended a hand to help her. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable enough. The interior of the house was surprisingly welcoming, clean and well-ordered, with simple but sturdy furniture. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by bookshelves filled with volumes that made Sarah raise her eyebrows in appreciation. My sister's doing, Sam explained, following her gaze. She's convinced a ranch house needn't be primitive. Sam showed her to a small but pleasant bedroom that had belonged to his sister. Make yourself at home. I need to check on the herd, but I'll be back by supper time. Kitchen stocked if you're hungry before then. Left alone, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the swift change in her circumstances. That morning, she'd been prepared to confront Thomas. Now she found herself in a stranger's home, employed as his housekeeper. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Yet as she unpacked her meager belongings, she felt the first stirrings of relief. Sam Lawson had offered her a respite time to gather her strength and consider her future without the pressure of immediate destitution. Later that afternoon, Sarah explored the kitchen and decided to prepare supper. Cooking had always calmed her, and she welcomed the familiar routine. She found a well-stocked pantry and began preparing a simple meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and cornbread. The sound of boots on the porch announced Sam's return just as she was taking the cornbread from the oven. Something smells mighty good, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. He'd clearly washed up at the pump outside, his face and hair damp, sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms. I hope you don't mind, Sarah said. I thought cooking might be a good way to begin earning my keep. Sam's smile warmed his entire face. Mind, Mrs. Harrison, I've been living on my own cooking while Zoe's away. This is the finest welcome I could imagine. They ate at the kitchen table, the awkwardness between them gradually easing as Sam told her about the ranch, the rhythms of the seasons, the challenges of the last harsh winter, his hopes for expanding the herd. And your sister visits your aunt often? Sarah asked. Sam's expression grew serious. Our aunt's been ailing. Zoe's been gone 3 weeks now, and her last letter suggested she might need to stay another month at least. I'm sorry to hear that. You must miss her. I do. She's all the family I have left. He hesitated. Mrs. Harrison, Sarah, she corrected gently. If I'm to live in your home, we should dispense with formalities. Sarah, he amended. I want you to know that while I offered this arrangement to help you, it's no charity. The work is real, and I'll pay you fair wages besides room and board. That's more than generous, Sarah said, genuinely touched. One more thing, Sam added, meeting her gaze directly. Your situation with Harrison, I mean it's your business. I won't speak of it to anyone unless you want me to. The kindness of this man she barely knew brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thank you. Sam looked away, seemingly embarrassed by her emotion. Well, I should see to a few things before turning in. Thank you for supper. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah fell into the rhythm of life at the Lawson Ranch. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast for Sam and his two ranch hands brothers named Elijah and Isaiah Jenkins. During the days, she kept house, tended the small vegetable garden, and gradually added her touch to the home's interior. In the evenings, she prepared supper and occasionally sat with Sam on the porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Sam was a considerate employer, never demanding or critical. He seemed genuinely appreciative of her efforts to make the house more comfortable. To her surprise, she discovered that beneath his quiet exterior lay a thoughtful, well-read man. Their conversations ranged from literature to politics to the changing character of the West. "Do you miss the East?" he asked one evening as they sat watching distant lightning illuminate the horizon. "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I miss certain conveniences, certain refinements. But there's something about this country." She gestured toward the vast expanse before them. "It has a wildness that speaks to something inside me." Sam nodded. "That's why I could never leave, even after everything. The land gets in your blood." "Everything?" Sarah questioned softly. Sam was quiet, so long she thought he might not answer. "After the war, I wasn't fit company for decent folks. Too much anger, too many nightmares. I drifted, took work where I could find it, some of it not particularly honorable." He stared into the distance. "My father's letters finally reached me in Denver. He was dying and wanted to see me before the end. I barely made it in time." "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "He left me this place and the responsibility that came with it. It saved me, having something to care for beyond myself." He glanced at her. "What about you? What did you dream of before?" "Before Thomas left?" Sarah finished for him. "A home of my own. Children. Simple things." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elijah Jenkins, riding hard from town. "Mr. Lawson, got word from town rustlers hit the Peterson place last night. Sheriff's asking for men to help track them." Sam was on his feet immediately. "How many head did they lose?" 20 or more. "And Peterson's son was shot when he tried to stop them." "Is he alive?" Sam demanded. "Barely. Doc Simmons is with him now." Sam turned to Sarah, his expression grim. "I need to go. These rustlers have been hitting ranches all through the territory." "Of course," Sarah said. "Be careful." He nodded, already moving toward the barn. "Lock the doors tonight. The Jenkins boys will take turns keeping watch, but just to be safe." Sarah watched from the porch as Sam and Elijah rode away, disappearing into the growing darkness. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she felt vulnerable, acutely aware of her isolation. She slept fitfully that night, waking at every sound. Sam and the men didn't return the next day, or the next. On the third morning, Sarah was hanging laundry when she spotted riders approaching Sam and Isaiah, looking trail-worn and exhausted. "You're safe," she said, relief washing over her as Sam dismounted. "More or less," he replied with a weary smile. "Caught up to the rustlers at the territorial line. There was a fight. We got most of the cattle back, but 3 of them escaped." "And the Peterson boy?" Sam's expression darkened. "He didn't make it." That evening, after Sam had bathed and rested, Sarah found him sitting alone on the porch, a glass of whiskey in hand. Without speaking, she sat beside him, offering silent companionship. "I knew the boy," Sam said finally. 17 years old, eager to prove himself a man. "It wasn't your fault," Sarah said gently. "No, but it's the way of things out here sometimes. Life can be brutal and short." He drained his glass. "Makes a man think about what matters." The intensity of his gaze made Sarah's heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought he might say something more, but he simply rose and wished her good night. The following week brought a change to their routine. A letter arrived from Sam's sister, stating that their aunt had taken a turn for the worse. Zoe would need to remain in Denver indefinitely. "This changes things," Sam said, concern etched on his features. "I can't ask you to take on Zoe's responsibilities permanently." "Why not?" Sarah asked. "Unless you're dissatisfied with my work?" "Not at all. You've been a godsend." His brow furrowed. "But this arrangement was meant to be temporary, a way for you to find your feet while deciding about your husband." Sarah looked away. In truth, thoughts of Thomas had receded further with each passing day. "I haven't made any decisions yet." "You haven't mentioned him once in 3 weeks," Sam observed quietly. "No. I haven't, Sarah acknowledged, meeting his gaze steadily. Perhaps that's a decision in itself. Something shifted in Sam's expression, a softening, a spark of something she wasn't ready to name. Then stay, he said, for as long as you want. As spring gave way to early summer, Sarah found herself increasingly content with her new life. The work was satisfying, the surroundings beautiful, and her employer. Sam was becoming more than just an employer. He was a friend, a confidant, and increasingly, the first person she thought of upon waking and the last before sleep claimed her. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her flush. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their disappointments. In the evenings, sometimes Sam read aloud from one of the books on his shelves while she mended or sewed. It was during one such evening, with Sam reading Tennyson's Ulysses, that Sarah realized she was falling in love with him. The recognition both thrilled and terrified her. She was still a married woman, regardless of Thomas's betrayal. And Sam had never indicated he saw her as anything more than his housekeeper and perhaps a friend. The moment of realization must have shone on her face, for Sam paused in his reading. Sarah? Is everything all right? She forced a smile. Yes, just thinking. Please continue. Sam studied her for a moment longer before returning to the poem. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sarah slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The moon cast silver light across the landscape, the distant mountains dark silhouettes against the star-strewn sky. Couldn't sleep either? Sam's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame backlit by the soft glow from within. It's too beautiful a night to waste on sleep, Sarah replied, making room for him beside her. He sat, careful to maintain a proper distance between them. For several minutes, they simply sat in companionable silence, gazing at the star-filled sky. I received a letter today, Sam said finally, from an acquaintance in Laramie. Sarah tensed. About Thomas? Sam nodded. He's left Laramie. Apparently, he abandoned Zoe Bellamy just as he abandoned you. Rumor has it he's gone to California with a saloon girl. The news should have devastated her. Instead, Sarah felt only a distant sadness for the young, hopeful woman she'd once been. Poor Zoe, she murmured. I hope she has family to turn to. Sam turned to face her. You're not upset? I'm long past being hurt by Thomas Harrison, Sarah said truthfully. What we had was already gone before I ever left Missouri. She hesitated. In a strange way, I should thank him. If he had sent for me as promised, I never would have found my way here. The implication of her words hung in the air between them. Sam's eyes searched hers, questions evident in his gaze. Sarah, he began, his voice low and uncertain. I don't want to presume, but a rider approached at a gallop, cutting through the night's stillness. Sam was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the gun at his hip. Who's there? He called. It's Elijah, Mr. Lawson. We got trouble. The youngest Jenkins brother reined in his horse, breathing hard. Rustlers again. They hit the Morgan place, and they're heading this way with the herd. Sam turned to Sarah, his expression torn between duty and the conversation interrupted. I have to go. I know, she said, rising as well. Be careful. He gripped her shoulders briefly. Lock the doors. If anyone comes who isn't me or the Jenkins boys, there's a shotgun in my room. Sarah watched him saddle his horse and ride off with Elijah, the moment between them lost to the urgency of the situation. This time, the danger came much closer to home. Shortly after midnight, Sarah was awakened by the sound of gunshots in the distance. She dressed quickly and retrieved the shotgun Sam had mentioned, her hands trembling as she loaded it according to the instructions he had given her weeks earlier. More shots rang out, closer now, followed by the thunder of approaching hooves. Sarah positioned herself near a window, peering cautiously into the darkness. Several riders burst into the yard, silhouetted against the moonlight. To her horror, she saw that one was slumped over his saddle, clearly injured. Sarah, Sam's voice called out. Open the door. She rushed to comply, heart in her throat as Sam and Isaiah half-carried, half-dragged a third man into the house. It's James Morgan, Sam explained tersely. He was tracking the rustlers with us when they ambushed us in the pass. They laid the wounded rancher on the kitchen table. In the lamplight, Sarah could see blood soaking through his shirt. Bullet went clean through his shoulder, Sam said, ripping the shirt away to expose the wound. Sarah, I need hot water, clean cloths, and the medical kit from the top shelf in my room. Sarah worked alongside Sam for the next hour as he cleaned and bandaged James Morgan's wound. The rancher was pale but conscious, grimacing in pain as Sam extracted fragments of cloth from the bullet's path. Did you see who they were? Sam asked as he worked. Morgan nodded weakly. One of them was Davidson. Recognized his voice when they were arguing about which way to go. Sam's jaw tightened. Davidson from Bright Creek? Same one, Morgan confirmed. He's been running with a rough crowd lately. Word is they've been hitting ranches from here to Laramie. Sarah remembered the unpleasant men from the general store Davidson and his friend who had accosted her before Sam's intervention. The thought that they might return to the ranch filled her with dread. By dawn, Morgan was resting as comfortably as possible in Sam's bed. Sam himself looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes as he washed the blood from his hands at the kitchen pump. You should rest, Sarah told him, setting a cup of coffee before him. He shook his head. No time. Davidson and his gang are still out there with stolen cattle. Isaiah's gone to town to gather more men. And you intend to go after them again? Sarah couldn't keep the worry from her voice. Sam met her gaze. I have to. These men are threatening everything we've built out here. If ranchers can't protect their herds, none of us will survive. Then at least eat something before you go, Sarah insisted, already moving to prepare a quick meal. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Sam watching her, his expression unreadable. When she placed a plate of eggs and bacon before him, he caught her hand. Sarah, he said quietly, about last night, before Elijah interrupted, it's all right, she said quickly. There are more important matters now. No, Sam said firmly. There aren't. He rose to his feet, still holding her hand. I've been wanting to say this for weeks now. Your husband never sent for you. He abandoned you without a second thought. And while I'd never wish that pain on anyone, I'm selfish enough to be grateful for it. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Grateful, because it brought you here. To my home. To me. His eyes never left hers. I know you're still legally bound to Harrison. I know there are obstacles. But I need you to know that if you want to stay not as my housekeeper, but as... As what? Sarah whispered, hardly daring to hope. As my wife. My partner. The woman I want to build a life with. Sam's voice grew rough with emotion. Your husband never sent for you. Then let me be the one who does. Let me be the man who chooses you every day for the rest of our lives. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as years of loneliness and abandonment gave way to the promise in Sam's words. Sam, the sound of approaching riders interrupted her response. Sam released her hand reluctantly, moving to the window. It's Isaiah with the sheriff and several men. He reported, relief evident in his voice. He turned back to Sarah, his expression torn. I have to go with them. Sarah nodded, understanding the duty that called him. I'll be here when you return. A smile broke across his face. Is that a yes? It's a come back safely so we can discuss our future properly, she replied, her own smile tremulous but certain. The posse departed within the hour, leaving Sarah to tend to the wounded James Morgan and worry about Sam's safety. The day stretched endlessly, each hour marked by Morgan's needs and Sarah's growing anxiety. By nightfall, there was still no word. Sarah sat on the porch, straining to hear any sound of returning riders. When Morgan called for water, she attended to him mechanically, her thoughts with Sam and the danger he faced. He's a good man, Morgan said, observing her distraction. Best I've known in these parts. Yes, he is, Sarah agreed, adjusting his pillows. Man like that deserves happiness, the rancher continued. Been alone too long since his folks passed. Sarah smiled slightly. Are you playing matchmaker, Mr. Morgan? Morgan chuckled, then winced at the pain it caused. Just stating facts, madam. Way he looks at you. It's plain as day what he's feeling. It was nearly midnight when Sarah, dozing in a chair by Morgan's bedside, was startled awake by the sound of horses in the yard. She rushed to the window, heart pounding, to see riders dismounting among them, Sam. She flew to the door, propriety forgotten in her relief. Sam stood on the porch, his expression weary but triumphant. You're safe, she breathed, fighting the urge to throw her arms around him. We got them, he said. Davidson and his gang won't be rustling anyone's cattle again. Sheriff's got them locked up in town. Only then did Sarah notice the bloodstain on his sleeve. "You're hurt." Sam glanced down as if just remembering the injury. "It's nothing. Bullet grazed my arm during the firefight." "Inside. Now," Sarah ordered, already rolling up her sleeves. "That needs cleaning before it festers." In the kitchen, Sam submitted to her ministrations with good grace, wincing only slightly as she cleaned the wound with carbolic solution. "How's Morgan?" he asked as she bandaged his arm. "Sleeping now. His fever broke this afternoon, which the doctor said was a good sign when he stopped by." "And you?" Sam's voice softened. "How are you, Sarah?" She secured the bandage and stepped back, suddenly shy. "I'm well. Better now that you're home safely." "Home," Sam repeated, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's what this place has become with you in it. A home, not just a house." Sarah took a deep breath. "Before you left, you asked me a question. Or started to, at least." "I did," Sam acknowledged. "And I meant every word. But there's something I need to tell you first." He gestured for her to sit, taking the chair opposite her at the kitchen table. "I've been doing some asking around about your situation with Harrison. According to Judge Willoughby in Cheyenne, since Harrison committed bigamy by marrying Zoe Bellamy while still legally married to you, your marriage could be annulled." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. "Annulled?" "Truly." Sam nodded. "The judge said it would require some paperwork and possibly a trip to Cheyenne, but it could be done relatively quickly." He reached across the table to take her hands. "I know it's sudden. I know we've only known each other a short time. But some things a man just knows, Sarah. And I know that I love you." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have almost from the beginning." The joy that transformed Sam's face was worth every moment of pain she had endured to reach this point. He rose from his chair and knelt beside her, taking both her hands in his. "Sarah Harrison, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not today, not until everything is legal and proper, but someday soon." "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Lawson." He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the promise of all that lay ahead for them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Sam pressed his forehead to hers. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness," he murmured. "Nor I," Sarah replied. "It seems we were both lost until we found each other." 2 months later, on a perfect September day, Sarah stood before the small church in Bright Creek wearing a new dress of ivory silk. Judge Willoughby had granted the annulment after Thomas's bigamy was confirmed, freeing her to marry again. Sam waited for her at the altar, handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him on Isaiah Jenkins' arm. The church was filled with neighbors and friends they'd made together, people who had embraced Sarah as one of their own. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice carrying through the sunlit church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." As they spoke their vows, Sarah thought of the long journey that had brought her to this moment, the pain of abandonment, the courage to seek answers, the unexpected salvation in the form of a kind cowboy who had offered help when she needed it most. In retrospect, Thomas's betrayal had been the greatest gift he could have given her, for it had led her to true love. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Sam's lips met hers in a kiss that sealed their union and promised a lifetime of devotion. When they turned to face their cheering friends, Sarah felt a sense of homecoming more powerful than anything she had ever known. The celebration afterward was joyful, a feast at the ranch with music, dancing, and congratulations from all sides. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land they now shared, Sam led Sarah away from the festivities to the privacy of the porch. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't quite believe it's real." "It's real," Sam murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "And it's just the beginning." Over the following years, the Lawson ranch prospered under their joint care. Sam's sister Zoe returned from Denver following their aunt's passing and settled in Bright Creek, eventually marrying the town's new doctor. The ranch expanded, with new grazing lands and improved breeding stock, making it one of the most successful in the territory. Sarah and Sam welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth, a year after their wedding. A son, James, followed 2 years later, and another daughter, Mary, 2 years after that. Their home rang with children's laughter, a sound that never failed to bring a smile to Sam's face. When Thomas Harrison's name appeared in a Denver newspaper 5 years later, he had been killed in a saloon brawl in San Francisco. Sarah felt only a distant pity for the man who had once been her husband. The life she might have had with him paled in comparison to the joy she had found with Sam. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Sam presented Sarah with a gift, a small carved box containing a gold locket. Inside was a tiny painting of their 3 children. "To remind you always of the family we've built together," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "As if I could ever forget," Sarah replied, her hand covering his. "You are the best decision I ever made, Samuel Lawson." Later that night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless evenings before, Sarah rested her head on Sam's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Thomas had sent for me as promised?" Sam was quiet for a moment. "I try not to think about it," he admitted. "The thought of never having found you." He shook his head. "But he didn't send for you. And I'll be grateful every day of my life that I was the one who did." "As will I," Sarah whispered, turning her face up for his kiss as the last light of day gilded the land. They had made their own a testament to love found in the most unexpected circumstances and cherished through all the years that followed.